Right now? Not in 1877. Not in 1921. Right now? January 22nd, 2026. National Park Service staff arrive at the President's house in Philadelphia, the site where George Washington held 9 enslaved human beings while serving as President of the United States. They dismantle the Freedom and Slavery exhibit, panel by panel. Gone. March 2025. The Department of Defense runs a digital sweep, purging content flagged for DEI language. Among the casualties, Jackie Robinson's military record. The Army career of the man who integrated Major League Baseball, tagged, deleted, and redirected to a URL that literally begins with the letters DEI. September 2025. Park rangers at Fort Pulaski National Monument in Georgia are ordered to remove the Scourged Back, a photograph taken in 1863 that documented what American slavery looked like on human skin. A photograph that survived 162 years. Ordered down in a single memo. 6,769 federal datasets. Deleted. Among them, data tracking Black maternal mortality. Sickle cell disease research. Environmental exposure in historically redlined communities. Racial disparities in the criminal justice system. Overnight. No archive requirement. No public vote. Here is what they need you to believe, that this is political controversy, a culture war, a disagreement. It is not. This is a 160-year operation, and it has a pattern. Every single time Black political power has grown in this country, they have moved to erase the history of how it was built. This is the receipt. The erasure always follows the power. After the Civil War, Black Americans did something no one in American history had done from a position of legal bondage. They organized, ran, and won. By 1870, 16 Black men held seats in the United States Congress. Hundreds more served in state legislatures. Black voters turned out in numbers that shaped national elections. And then came the Compromise of 1877. Behind closed doors, the presidency was handed to Rutherford B. Hayes in exchange for one thing: federal troops withdrawn from the South. Within months, Black officials were removed from office by force. Reconstruction was over. What followed was not just political, it was documentary. The United Daughters of the Confederacy launched a coordinated campaign to place monuments in Southern courthouses and schoolyards. Not to honor the dead, to control the story of who had been righteous. Textbooks in Southern states began calling the Civil War the War of Northern Aggression. Slavery became a benevolent institution in the pages of state-approved curriculum. Confederate officers became noble patriots. They didn't just take the offices. They rewrote the record of why the offices existed. Poll taxes, literacy tests, grandfather clauses. These were not independent inventions. They arrived immediately after the historical erasure, because a population that doesn't know it once held power does not know to fight for it again. That was the first wave. It will not be the last time this playbook runs. What happened in Tulsa in 1921 was not a riot. It was a coordinated military assault on the wealthiest Black community in America. Greenwood. 35 square blocks, over 10,000 Black residents, 600 businesses, a hospital, a law school, a Black Wall Street, built from nothing inside the constraints of American apartheid. Gone in 18 hours. The official Tulsa death count, 36. But here is what the state of Oklahoma did not tell anyone for 75 years. City records were confiscated. Newspaper archives were destroyed. Death certificates were falsified. Survivors were threatened into silence. For 3/4 of a century, the massacre did not appear in Oklahoma textbooks. Teachers did not teach it. Students did not know. In 2020, forensic investigators began excavating beneath Oaklawn Cemetery. They found 12 coffins from the massacre era. In mass graves, the official count of 36 did not hold. It never held. It took until 1996, 75 years, for Oklahoma to even formally investigate. Not act. Investigate. Here is what the cover-up was designed to obscure. Greenwood had one of the highest black voter registration rates in the state of Oklahoma. Black Wall Street was not just an economic threat. It was a political one, a self-sufficient, organized, voting black electorate, and it was destroyed, then disappeared from the record. You cannot organize around an atrocity that has been erased from history. That is not an accident. That is the strategy. The third wave moved into the classroom. In 1994, the College Board released the first advanced placement U.S. history framework to formally include Black history as integral to the American story. Congress threatened to defund it within weeks. In 2010, the Texas State Board of Education voted to minimize coverage of slavery and the civil rights movement in state social studies standards. This matters for a specific reason that has nothing to do with Texas. Texas buys so many textbooks that publishers across the country alter their national editions to match Texas standards. What Texas decides, 49 other states receive. In 2023, Florida's state-approved African American history curriculum included language suggesting that enslaved people who were legally property, developed skills that could be applied for their personal benefit. The state of Florida described human bondage as a professional development opportunity. That same year, the College Board released AP African American Studies, the first college-level course on the subject. The state of Florida blocked it on the day of its release. Governor Ron DeSantis called it indoctrination. Florida's Department of Education declared it inexplicably contrary to Florida law. The study of Black history, contrary to the law. Every 30 years. A wave of curriculum revision. A push to soft erase the record inside the education system, so that the next generation inherits a country with no memory of what was done and no framework to recognize when it's happening again. Which brings us to right now. This wave is different in speed, not in intent. Digital deletion does not require a monument removal crew. It does not require a book burning. It requires a keyword search, a server command, and no archive requirement. It happens overnight. It leaves no physical evidence. 6,769 federal datasets were deleted from government servers in 2025. These were not bureaucratic abstractions. They were the infrastructure of racial health equity, Black maternal mortality rates, sickle cell disease research, data on environmental contamination in redlined communities, racial disparities in juvenile justice processing. The data that proves systemic harm exists. Gone. At national park sites across the country, Fort Pulaski, Harper's Ferry, Manassas, and Independence National Historical Park, interpretive materials about slavery were ordered removed under Executive Order 14253, signed March 27, 2025, restoring truth and sanity to American history. The executive order's target language, materials that inappropriately disparage Americans past or living. Photographs of whipped, scarred, enslaved human beings, deemed disparaging. The Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture, the only presidential museum dedicated to the full documentation of Black life in America, faced a federal funding review. USDA civil rights enforcement staff were removed. Department of Defense military histories of the Tuskegee Airmen, the Navajo Code Talkers, and Black World War II veterans were swept in the same DI purge that deleted Jackie Robinson. It took the United Daughters of the Confederacy 50 years to rewrite the textbook record. It took Doge-affiliated teams weeks to delete the digital one. The mechanism is new. The objective has not changed by a single degree. And if you understand what always comes after the erasure, you understand exactly what this is preparation for. This is the argument the mainstream conversation consistently misses. The erasure of Black history has never been purely cultural. It has always been political infrastructure, built specifically to enable voter suppression by removing the population's knowledge of how the tools of suppression have been used before. After Reconstruction, the history of Black political power was erased. Poll taxes and literacy tests followed. A population with no recorded memory of what it achieved cannot name what is being taken. After Tulsa, the history of Black Wall Street's political organization was buried. The pattern of targeting organized, voting Black communities was buried with it. June 25, 2013. The Supreme Court handed down Shelby County versus Holder, striking down the formula that determined which states required federal preclearance before changing voting laws. The same day, Texas announced implementation of the most restrictive voter ID law in the nation. Alabama followed within 3 days. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 had been gutted. It received far less public resistance than it would have if generations of Americans had been taught what the years before 1965 actually looked like. Look at the map. The states that have most aggressively purged Black history from their curricula, Florida, Georgia, Texas, Alabama, are the same states that have enacted the most restrictive voting laws in the modern era. Voter ID requirements, polling place closures, voter roll purges, felon disenfranchisement that in some states exceeds the scope of the Civil War era. This is not correlation. This is sequence. This is a system. Students who do not know the history of the Voting Rights Act do not know when it is being dismantled. That is the point. Draw the line. 1865, Reconstruction begins. Black Americans enter political power for the first time. 1877, Reconstruction ends. Federal troops withdrawn. Black officials removed. Historical revisionism begins. 1896, Plessy versus Ferguson enshrines separate but equal as the legal architecture of erasure. 1921, Tulsa Massacre destroys Black Wall Street, and a 75-year government cover-up begins immediately. 1954, Brown versus Board of Education. Southern states accelerate lost cause curriculum to counter the ruling's moral clarity. 1965, the Voting Rights Act passes, and state-level counter-campaigns to undermine it begin the same year. 1994, AP U.S. History includes Black history. Congress threatens to defund it within weeks. 2013, Shelby County versus Holder guts the Voting Rights Act. Voter restriction laws begin passing the same day. 2023, AP African American Studies is blocked in Florida on its release date. 2025, Executive Order 14253. 6,769 datasets deleted. NPS exhibits dismantled. DoD history swept. 2026, the President's House Slavery exhibit is physically removed from Independence National Historical Park in the city where American independence was declared. This is not a series of isolated political decisions made by different people across different centuries. This is a coherent, generational strategy. Maintain power by controlling memory. Every wave of erasure has been followed, without exception, by an attack on Black political rights. The question is not whether this is happening. The receipts are in your hand. The question is what comes next, and whether enough people know the history to recognize it before it completes. Here is what they have never been able to erase. They withdrew the federal troops in 1877, and Reconstruction produced some of the most sophisticated Black political organizing America had ever seen, in the teeth of violence and without resources. They burned Greenwood to the ground in 1921. Black residents began rebuilding within months. They buried the civil rights movement in curriculum and fought it in courts and streets for 100 years. It still produced the Voting Rights Act of 1965, the most consequential civil rights legislation in American history. The through line of every erasure attempt is the same. They fear most what an informed, organized, registered, and voting Black electorate can do. That fear has driven 160 years of documented policy, which means the most dangerous thing you can do, the thing that operates in direct defiance of every wave on this timeline, is register. Verify your registration. Know this history with enough specificity that you recognize when it is being taken again. They are betting you don't know. They have made a 160-year investment in you not knowing. This is what we do here. Every episode is a receipt. Register. Verify. Come back. The Black Genius Files.